And also the pressure is mounting. The tactics deployed by Israel in its pursuit to take down Hamas leadership has brought these tactics into sharp focus. The clamor for ceasefire is, of course, getting louder. And Israel is not just able to temper its violence. We told you yesterday as to how the United States has thrown its weight solidly behind Israel, but it is also now sounding concerned, and it is adding caution in its tone and tenor. In the latest, the American Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has said in an opinion piece that he wrote for one of the local American newspapers that the United States will ensure that Israel will get what it needs to defend its people against all threats, including from Iran and its proxies. But at the same time, he's asserted that the way that Israel defends itself matters, hinting that Israel must relook at its policy of pursuing extreme violence, where it is carrying out relentless bombings in some of the most densely populated neighborhoods anywhere in the world. Now, Beijing has also strongly condemned the Israeli strikes that are leveling apartment buildings, and it's being done indiscriminately, where it's burying people, including children, under rubble.
China is deeply shocked by the attack on the refugee camp in the Gaza Strip that resulted in a large number of civilian casualties, and we strongly condemn it. China urges all parties concerned, especially Israel, to exercise maximum restraint and keep calm effectively, implement the General Assembly's resolution of 27th October, immediately impose a ceasefire to the utmost to protect civilians, and open a humanitarian corridor as soon as possible to avoid an even greater humanitarian disaster.
Now, the Israeli military claims that it is targeting a large refugee camp in Jabalia, just north of the Gaza city, that it calls as a Hamas stronghold. That also includes underground tunnels and a command center. But the Arab world, and indeed the rest of the world, including the European Union, is enraged. Now, Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has urged the Muslim nations to end trade with Israel, to stop the supplies of oil and food in response to this relentless and cruel bombardment that Israel is resorting on the Gaza Strip. Now, Iran says it is, quote-unquote, natural for Tehran-backed groups to attack Israel in the wake of the war on Hamas, warning of a wider spillover if no ceasefire is reached.
If this war is not stopped immediately and the joint attacks against civilians, the women and children of the Gaza by America and Israel are not halted, then the consequences for those who are waging this war will be grave.
And also importantly, just a short while back, Jordan has also announced that it is recalling its ambassador to Israel and has also notified Israel not to send back the Israeli ambassador to Oman, who left due to security precautions at the beginning of this war. Now, Qatar has also condemned Israel's relentless bombing of Gaza's largest refugee camp. It's also warned that such strikes will undermine mediation efforts and de-escalation efforts. Remember, Qatar is playing a key role in efforts to secure the release of hostages that are presently in the custody of Hamas. Saudi Arabia's foreign ministry has also echoed anger, saying that Israeli attack on the Jabalia refugee camp has resulted in deaths and injuries to a large number of innocent civilians. The statement is the latest sign that the Israel-Gaza war has in fact fractured all efforts at normalizing relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Now, talking of ties, Israel-Turkey relations are also in complete tatters. On Saturday, Israel said that it is recalling its diplomats from Turkey after the Turkish president told a massive crowd of protesters in Istanbul that his government is preparing to declare Israel to be a war criminal state due to its actions in the Gaza Strip. Now, clearly, as Israel continues with its relentless campaign of aerial bombings, besides a ground invasion into the Gaza Strip, questions are being raised about Israel's insistence on finishing off Hamas and also the tactics that it is deploying to do so, regardless of the humanitarian cost and the ever-rising death toll, especially of women and children, who are now said to be nearly about 60% of all casualties in this war. All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of what all of this, of course, means, we're being joined by Dr. Gilbert Doctorow, who's an international affairs analyst, an author and a historian, and he's joining us live from Brussels. Now, Dr. Doktorov, we've just got information in the last couple of hours that the Jabalia refugee camp, which is the biggest refugee camp in the Gaza Strip, has been bombed again in a span of less than 24 hours. The death toll is horrific. Now, these are instances which would be extremely difficult for Israel to explain what it is doing, because the tactics that Israel has been using, although it says that it is going after Hamas, it seems to be inflicting tremendous damage on civilians.
Yes, there has been a lot of coverage of this latest bombing. And there has been coverage, as you have just been doing, of the admonitions in the direction of Israel for its present behavior. I'm not a legal expert, and I'm a political scientist. And so what I'm about to say is not based on a law-based definition of war crimes. It is based on the logic that is summarized in American talk as if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. Mm-hmm. By all measures of layman's interest, the Israeli government is committing war crimes. How to stop that is the question. You have discussed the admonitions that have been directed by various Arab leaders, and the subtle threats of commercial damage, diplomatic damage to Israel. In the meantime, less subtle threats have been issued against Israel, particularly from Yemen, which is not just talking but acting. Mm-hmm. They have indicated by their recent firing of ballistic and cruise missiles at Israel, some of which I understand landed in Israel, that they are prepared to go all-out war against Israel. Now, Yemen is in the news, but we don't usually think of it as a major state. The population happens to be 33 million, which is just 3 million shy of Saudi Arabia.
Right.
Their leader has threatened to send several 100,000 jihadis against Israel. So the military threat is there, but there's another solution available. And that is, there is one country and there's one man who can address this issue and spare us an escalation towards regional war, if not a global war.
Right.
And that man is sitting in the Oval Office in Washington. Mr. Biden.
That actually brings me to my next question here, Dr. Doktorov, because the American role in this war is something that is going to be looked at very closely. America is the nation that is arming Israel, and it has backed Israel to the hilt. But now, increasingly, the statements that are emerging from the United States, they are urging Israel to take a look at the tactics that it is deploying and to ensure that the civilian casualties that have been inflicted in this war are in some ways not what the Americans would like to see. Do you expect the Americans to now use the leverage that they've got in Tel Aviv to temper Israel's actions from here on?
This very question was the subject of an essay in this morning's Financial Times by their former Washington bureau chief, Edward Luce, who was a regular contributor. And he was asking that very question, whether or not Mr. Biden can influence Mr. Netanyahu, whom he's known for decades, to take a more reasonable and less provocative course of war against the Palestinians in Gaza. Luce's conclusion was that Biden does not really have influence with Mr. Netanyahu. I beg to differ. There's one thing that he can do. He can stop shipping arms. Absolutely. It's entirely in his power. That's a very unsubtle message that would get Mr. Netanyahu's attention. And I want to add, it's not one man who is bearing all of the responsibility for the horrific crimes being committed by the Israeli Defense Forces. Right. This morning on BBC, the president of Israel, Isaac Herzog, was asked about these questions, just what you have posed. And it was amazing, the outrageous replies that he gave, saying that Israel is providing humanitarian assistance that Israel is helping the Palestinians in the north move to the south to safety. This is so impudent in its outrageous lies that Israel has a serious governmental problem that's much bigger than one Mr. Netanyahu.
I think that's
the Americans
that's
have the
of course
remedy
the
at
crux
their
of the
disposal.
issue here, Dr. Rao. We are completely out of time. It now remains to be seen, as to what leverage the Americans can, of course, exercise on the Israelis. The best thing, as you said, is if Joe Biden were to stop sending weapons, this war would, of course, step down. Thank you very much indeed for joining us and providing us with that perspective. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.